Recently, in light of all of the marketing of and writing on Doom, as well as the general trend of increasingly violent TV, I've been thinking of violence and how it is used. More specifically, I've been thinking about how violence has been made out to be some kind of feature, a selling point. A lot of discussion regarding violence in the new game Doom has focused on the glory kill system, in which, after staggering an enemy, one can execute them in a canned and usually horrifically violent animation, netting some rewards in the way of health or possibly ammo. That's all well and good. I can't say the demons of hell particularly deserve sympathy. Nor do I feel uncomfortable with the idea of a Doom game being violent. I do, however, have a bit of an issue with the way in which games such as these are marketed. The way in which the idea of wading through entrails and popping eyes from their sockets are described as selling points. It seems apt to me that these violent animations are called glory kills, as that's exactly the trend they seem to play off of. They glorify violence. And while in the grander context of Doom that's pretty fine, in certain other games I don't really think it is. The marketing and image of games like Hatred or Postal comes to mind, wherein the high points of the game seem to be the great deal of ways in which it is possible to kill people, and that's about it. Still though, even if they are not to my taste, games such as Hatred and Postal do have a place and their own audience. It isn't the game I'm irritated by so much as the way it's marketed. The reality of Hatred was pathetic. The dialogue and mannerisms of the quote-unquote protagonist would have embarrassed even the most angsty of teenage metalheads. And going off of reviews, so would the gameplay. Here, for full disclosure, I must admit I haven't played it and probably never will. So what did the game offer? Violence. That was it. Senseless violence. That of course led to the marketing strategy that became so infamous. The notion of killing innocent NPCs for no other reason than hatred was thrust into the centre of the trailer. The ridiculous violence became the only talking point for both those that supported the game and those that were offended by it. And all the while, destructive creations sat at their computers gleefully exploiting all the controversy the game's trailer generated to freely advertise a game that was ultimately revealed to be bog standard at best. To be clear, both sides are sensationalizing violence in a way that I consider to be stupid. On the one hand, you aren't killing real people and the game itself won't harm anyone, and on the other, it's a touch irresponsible to focus so heavily on violence without any justification. Easily influenced people, and of course kids, will find and play the game if it appeals to them, and certain kids are more susceptible to influence than others. Yes, the why won't anyone think of the children argument is tired, overused and tangential, but I teach kids to play drums, and when an otherwise very nice boy around the age of 10 describes with some glee executing a curb stomp in GTA 5, I get a little bit creeped out. Getting back on track though, I want to talk about what can be considered justification for violence of this nature. This is when I bring out another example that will surprise no one. Hotline Miami. Hotline Miami's violence is, for my money, more disturbing than that of Hatred, bar the fact that your victims have weapons and fight back. Knives disembowel, pipes break necks, and eyes are popped from sockets in a hyper-violent way that still feels sickening despite the pixelated graphics. However, there is a very different angle to this violence. It is not framed as some kind of dark catharsis, but rather a disgusting and horrible act that deserves some closer examination. Hotline Miami boasts both an abstract and somewhat minimal plot on the surface, and also a meta-narrative in which the violence of the game plays a significant part. The biggest clue as to the nature of this meta-narrative is the way the soundtrack stops after you've killed everyone in the level. As you are in the middle of the action, the thumping soundtrack alongside scores and multipliers, as well as the naturally ultra-colourful visual style, all serve to distract the player from the acts of violence you are committing. But the moment you've killed the last NPC, the music stops, an eerie ambient drone takes its place, and you're only left with "go to car" as your objective. Add to this levels that are frequently designed to force the player to wade through the gore they so recently created, and a tutorial boasting unsettling lighting and defenseless goons, and the full weight of what you've done comes back after the music has left, deliberately leaving a sour taste in the mouth, where most games celebrate what you just did. Another clue as to what's going on between the game and the player is the way in which, before every level, Jacket has to leave his house. The reason or justification for your violent acts are not given to you, rather the player interprets it from something that isn't there. While Jacket's answering machine might have recorded a tone of voice or prior instructions, none of that is given to the player. The only reason you leave the house is simply because you were told to by the game, rather than any narrative purpose within it. You could simply wait at your house and that would be the end of it, but in the search for entertainment you leave to murder a bunch of gangsters with no reason to do so. With these two elements in mind, I believe the game is criticizing your acceptance, your willful ignorance towards what you're doing on screen. It is a game narratively defined by traits that one might otherwise think to be mutually exclusive. It is a piece of violent media that criticizes our consumption of violence as entertainment. Thereby, Hotline Miami not only justifies its use of violence, but actually creates a situation wherein it is needed. Spec Ops: The Line also did this in its most infamous scene, a scene which I shall not discuss for the sake of those who might not yet have played it. But it is suffice to say the brutal violence that permeates the game is not just an afterthought or selling point. Violence can be a useful and powerful tool when used to back up the themes or concept of the game, movie, TV show, etc. But when it is used carelessly, it doesn't just lessen the quality of the rest of the work, but can at times ruin my enjoyment of it completely. So what do you think? Have any games I didn't mention justified their violent gameplay within the narrative? Have any other examples in other mediums gone too far with violence, or perhaps haven't gone far enough? And finally, was I more or less of a wanker for desperately trying to avoid the term ludonarrative dissonance? Let me know in the comments below. Cheers, have a good one.